Happy Thursday. Today is a very chilly day. It's like 65 degrees. I know that's not really very chilly, but compared to what it has been, which has been normally around 60 every morning, it is chilly. So sue me. Yes, it will get colder. No, I'm not necessarily looking forward to it. But hey, into every life a little rain must fall. Norsac Maniac asked me about a conversation that he was having with Finbar Martin, and I use the word conversation very loosely because Finbar Martin doesn't have conversations. Finbar Martin finds articles on the internet the thrust of which he likes. It matches what his particular idea is, and then he will cite them and just basically repeat lines from them as if they're his arguments to you ad nauseum, because I guess maybe he thinks everybody else can't Google and find the exact same arguments or the exact same articles. Anyway, the particular discussion was on New York Times v. Sullivan, and that particular Supreme Court case rolled in two actions because they were both related. Sullivan was some government official in Alabama, and he sued New York Times based on something that they published, and he sued these four pastors based on something that they may or may not have been involved in getting. It was an advertisement of some sort. I guess not really an advertisement. They were asking for donations for a political cause for Martin Luther King Jr.'s legal defense fund. And anyway, this particular guy, Sullivan, he thought that these ads, even though they didn't mention him directly, they mentioned the police. He thought that they were defaming him. And congratulations, he won in Alabama. Could have been race related. I don't know. It seems like they stretched really hard to make it defamatory about him, but whatever. That is neither here nor there. Anyway, in the Supreme Court decision, the Supreme Court looked at it from a freedom of expression kind of standpoint. They, the Supreme Court looked at it from a publisher and a speaker kind of point of view. Like, you have the right to, I know, and there is a very fine line between the two. There's a very fine line. But in libel, there's the original kind of speaker, and then if you republish the work, then you are, that particular libel is imputed back to you. So it wasn't what the New York Times said necessarily. It was because they allowed this particular, I think it was an advertisement, to run. But the court looked at it, and the court basically held that you have the right to freedom of speech, and you have the right to make reasonable errors. Basically, they were looking at anti-sedition acts where, if you said anything bad about the government, it had, gosh darn golly, better be true, or else at the time it was like a $5,000 fine, which was huge. Anyway, the court said that that's basically unconstitutional right there, and because this particular defamation statute is essentially the same thing. It just has civil penalties instead of criminal penalties, but you can be sued by everybody you defamed instead of just one person, so theoretically you could end up paying more. It's a government action, and therefore you get First Amendment protections via the 14th Amendment, and you have the right to freedom of speech, and you have the right to publish stuff and say stuff that that you believe is true, or you should believe is true, unless there's actual malice. So if you're saying something about a government official, and it's expanded to other public kind of people, then they can't sue you for defamation. Well, they can sue you but they can't win on a suit for defamation unless they prove actual malice. Now, Finbar's point in the articles that he was spouting from, we're making essentially the case that because the Supreme Court treated the press, the New York Times, and the pastors, Abernathy and his little group, because the court treated them the same, then they have all the same freedoms of the press as New York Times. But the same argument could also be made that because the Supreme Court treated New York Times the same as they treated Abernathy, then New York Times has no more rights or privileges under the Constitution than anybody else. So, because the court really didn't rest on freedom of the press, it rested on basically the right to express your opinions about the government and, seek redress, etc. It was basing it mentioned freedom of the press a couple times, but it just kind of threw it in there. The court really hasn't defined freedom of the press. So every time people are coming here, well, what about freedom of the press? I have the freedom of the press. I'm a journalist gathering content for a story. I have freedom of the press. It doesn't, just because the Constitution says it doesn't mean that it has any actual meaning. And I think it doesn't have any actual meaning because to date, the court has found that all the protections, good morning, all the protections required for the press are already wrapped up in the freedom of speech, because the press is basically just publishing opinions and facts and things like that. So there's no need to create any special exemption for them, because it's already just freedom of speech. So, is Finbar Martin wrong? No. Is he terribly uncreative and repetitive and doesn't really supply anything of use? Yes. Because let's say, for example, that he was correct, or more correct, I guess, and that we're all journalists. Let's just say that. Well, the court found that there was no difference between just a normal dude and a journalist, although it wasn't dealing with journalism, it was dealing with the New York Times publishing somebody else's material. But, that's neither here nor there. We're just assuming that Finbar Martin is correct. It still doesn't add any particular protections. And the Supreme Court didn't expressly state that we are all journalists. It just treated us the same. So if a cop asks you, are you a journalist? And you say yes, then great. If the cop asks you, well, can I see your press pass? Or whatever the hell their press ID. And you start spouting, the Supreme Court says I don't need a press ID. All citizens are journalists. Basically, not only are you tipping your hand to the cop that you're absolutely not a journalist, but it's just a meaningless thing. It doesn't offer you any protections. It doesn't offer you any extra access. The only time press passes work is if the particular governmental agency that is asking for it recognizes it. So I know a lot of cities, police departments will issue press passes, and basically it just means that you've been vetted by that particular police department and they trust you to get closer to the action. It's not, and there are places that sell press passes. I'm sure the Pinac press pass is about, yeah, it's worth a little less than a roll of toilet paper, I think. Because Pinac doesn't have a good reputation. The police aren't going to just be like, oh, we could trust this guy, since Pinac gives these press passes out to actual convicted rapists and people with multiple firearm violations. Oh, but he has a Pinac press pass. Oh yeah, well, I'd be absolutely just, honor that. What could possibly go wrong? So yeah, the Pinac press pass isn't worth anything. I think Jeff Gray's the only person I have ever seen who holds a Pinac press pass that has any credibility that I've ever seen. Anyway, so there's that. Granite State dropped a new bombshell of a video this morning. It's pretty awesome. She gets a daycare teacher to do the walk of shame. I know. I was like, wow, she really stuck it to the man on that one. Whew. She's proud of it too. Daycare teacher didn't want her filming the kids, which I think is reasonable. But instead of just reasonably responding, nope. Granite State stuck the camera in her face, started talking about being on a public easement and all that nonsense, and turned it into a confrontation. And now she gets to monetize it, and she gets to make money, and she's just trying to secure your First Amendment freedoms, guys. So buy a t-shirt. It's all good. Do you see how she's defending your freedoms? I thought it was hilarious. In one of her live streams, she was like, hey guys, do you want me to talk about laws? I don't really know anything, but I could learn and I could tell you all about laws. I'm like, oh my God. I'm not saying she's not smart enough to learn about the law, but I'm just saying, please. Finally, kind of getting back to a theme I've been on for a few days. Let's talk about all X are Y. This little community seems to love that nonsense. Cops are bad. Okay. Or you get this one. This is the one I love. I'm not against cops. I'm just against bad cops. Really? That's convincing. Not only is that about the dumbest damn thing in the world to say, I'm not against food, I'm just against bad food. You're not saying anything. You're flapping your lips, words are coming out, but you're not saying anything. Anyway, no, I don't want to do sprinklers. We're going to go this way. But yeah, the whole I'm not against cops, I'm against bad cops. It's stupid because you're going to define what a good cop is and a bad cop is by what you feel, by your opinion, and it's essentially meaningless. It's a meaningless statement. Anyway, the whole cops are bad, or I'm seeing this on my channel quite a bit, auditors are bad. Both of those statements are false. Now, as a percentage, by what society finds good or bad, cops are much less bad than auditors. Now, notice how I qualified that. I'm not saying that cops are better than auditors. I'm just saying that society in general has found that cops are better people than auditors. You'll notice that cops tend to have fewer criminal convictions than auditors. Auditors are much more likely to have criminal records. You'll also notice that people in general tend to back the cops. And if you don't believe me, how about just on microcosm bases where Salvaggio was found innocent by the Citizens Community Advisory Board, or where Bao was found guilty by a jury composed of his peers. But in a more general scheme of things, you're not finding the auditors changing the laws to be harsher on the police. You're not finding the auditors changing the laws to get increased rights to film or anything like that. You're not seeing those things happen, and there's still very strong support for the police. But whenever you go around saying that, auditors are stupid, or cops are evil, or Democrats are Hitler, or Republicans are, I don't know, baby eaters, whatever you're trying to say, it's a little, you're not going to be right. You're just not going to be right. So it would be lovely if we could be aware of that language and of the people who are spouting it, because there's two kinds of people who are going to spout that sort of language. Let me set that one back 3, because trolls will spout it just for the sheer trollery of it. But there are people who are stupid, they'll spout it, and people who haven't thought it through yet. Those are the two kinds of people. And I'm hoping to get to the people who haven't thought it through yet with, it's just one of those things. Like, I keep getting asked, oh, why do you hate auditors? I don't hate auditors. I really despise the actions of certain auditors or certain people who call themselves auditors. But I also really enjoy the audits of other people who are auditors. So, the question is based on a premise that is untrue. So, anyway, that kind of petered out a little bit in my head. It was going somewhere, and then, I don't know, lack of coffee kicked in, and now it's not going anywhere. But yeah, the whole hashtag not all thing. Yeah. So anyway, how's your day going? No, just joking. All right, so thank you for watching, and have a great morning.